Hello Midnights. Thank you for tuning in. Next up, a deep dive into remote viewing, comprehensive and nuanced detail. Let us know where you are listening from and don't forget to subscribe. Remote viewing, RV, stands as one of the most intriguing and contentious subjects at the intersection of parapsychology, cognitive science, and intelligence history. It posits the radical notion that individuals can access information about distant, hidden, or future targets solely through non-sensory means. While often conflated with generalized clairvoyance, remote viewing distinguishes itself by its formalized methodologies, rigorous protocols, and a systematic attempt to replicate and analyze anomalous cognition. What is remote viewing? A deep dive into its core principles, practice, and theoretical underpinnings. At its most fundamental, remote viewing is an alleged cognitive faculty that enables an individual to perceive, describe, or sketch information about a target that is geographically or temporally remote from their current location, without the use of any known physical senses or conventional inferential reasoning. It operates on the premise that information about any object, event, person, or location exists in a non-local, ubiquitous field of consciousness or information, which a trained individual can access. This non-local aspect is critical. It implies that the information is not bound by the classical physics constraints of space and time. Theoretical underpinnings and proposed mechanisms. The philosophical and theoretical underpinnings for RV often draw from concepts that challenge materialistic views of consciousness. While no single, universally accepted scientific explanation exists, several speculative models have been proposed within parapsychology. The information field hypothesis. This widely considered model suggests that information about all aspects of reality, past, present, future, exists in a ubiquitous, non-physical information field. Consciousness, rather than being merely a product of the brain, is seen as an active participant capable of tuning into and extracting data from this field. The brain, in this view, acts more as a receiver and decoder than a generator of consciousness. Some proponents draw parallels to concepts like the Akashic records or a universal consciousness, though these are largely metaphysical. Consciousness entanglement. Drawing a loose analogy from quantum entanglement, some theories propose that consciousness itself might be entangled with the target or with the information pertaining to it. This entanglement would allow for instantaneous, non-local information transfer, irrespective of distance. However, it's crucial to note that this is a conceptual analogy and not a direct application of quantum physics, which does not support information transfer faster than light. The analogy remains highly controversial and is not accepted within mainstream physics. Morphic resonance/morphic fields, proposed by Rupert Sheldrake. This concept suggests the existence of non-physical morphic fields that contain an accumulated memory of past forms and activities. A remote viewer might be tapping into these fields, which extend beyond individual brains, akin to accessing a universal memory bank that influences living systems. Subconscious access to collective unconscious. Drawing on Jungian psychology, some suggest that RV accesses elements of a collective unconscious, a repository of universal experiences and knowledge shared by humanity, which may contain information about all phenomena. The viewer's subconscious mind, in this view, bypasses conscious filters to access this deeper layer of shared experience. The nature of the signal and the challenge of noise. Crucially, remote viewing is not typically described as a passive, spontaneous, or unbidden psychic flash, akin to a clear, photographic image or perfectly articulate verbal message. Instead, it is understood as a structured, active, and often arduous process that requires significant discipline and training. The information received by the remote viewer is rarely a clear, high-resolution visual movie or a perfectly articulate verbal description. Instead, it manifests as subtle, often fragmented, multisensory impressions. The primary challenge for a remote viewer is the signal-to-noise ratio. The signal is the desired, anomalous information from the target, often faint and fleeting. The noise comprises the viewer's own internal distractions, which can overwhelm the delicate signal. Analytical overlay, AOL, this is the most significant obstacle. It refers to the conscious mind's automatic tendency to interpret, rationalize, or guess what the raw sensory impressions mean, often based on prior knowledge, biases, or desires. For instance, if a viewer perceives cold, smooth, reflective, and hard, their conscious mind might immediately jump to mirror or ice. However, the actual target might be a polished granite counter. A core part of remote viewing training involves disciplined techniques to suppress or explicitly label AOL, ensuring that the raw, non-local signal is recorded accurately without contamination from logical deductions or wishful thinking. Somatic noise, physical discomfort, hunger, fatigue, or restless energy that distracts the viewer. Emotional noise, personal anxieties, excitement, or emotional states unrelated to the target, which can create strong internal static. Mental chatter, everyday thoughts, planning, internal monologues, or memory recalls that compete with the subtle incoming signal. The viewer's state and psychological demands. To maximize the signal and minimize the noise, remote viewers are trained to enter a specific state of mind. This is typically a relaxed, focused, and receptive state, often described as similar to a light meditative or hypnagogic state, where brainwave activity might shift towards alpha or theta frequencies. This state is conducive to accessing subconscious information and reducing the dominance of the analytical, critical conscious mind. The process demands considerable mental discipline, patience, and a non-judgmental attitude towards incoming data. Viewers must learn to trust subtle impressions without immediately forcing them into coherent narratives, a skill that takes extensive practice and continuous feedback. The psychological demands can be significant. Maintaining focus and suppressing internal noise for extended periods can be mentally taxing, and viewers may experience fatigue or even frustration when the signal is weak or elusive. Core procedural components in practice. 1. Target cue/coordinate. The viewer is provided with an ambiguous cue, such as a numerical random number coordinate or a simple phrase like "the target is on the other side of the world." This deliberate blinding is a critical control. It ensures that any accurate information derived ostensibly comes from a non-local source, rather than conventional knowledge, logical inference, or sensory leakage. The RNC acts as a kind of pointer or address to a specific informational node within the hypothesized information field. The selection of these targets is typically done through random number generators or similar methods to ensure that neither the viewer nor the experimenter has prior knowledge. 2. Structured protocols, for example, controlled remote viewing. This is where remote viewing diverges most sharply from generalized psychic impressions. Developed primarily by artist and self-proclaimed psychic Ingo Swann, a pivotal figure in RV history, at SRI, CRV is a highly formalized, multi-stage protocol designed to incrementally unpack information about the target. The stages are intended to manage the signal-to-noise ratio and reduce analytical overlay by guiding the viewer to collect raw data before attempting conscious interpretation. Stage 1. Initial impressions, ideograms and basic bilocational data. The viewer focuses on the RNC and records immediate, often unconscious, ideograms, simple graphic symbols representing elements like water, structure, land mass, that spontaneously emerge. These are followed by basic bilocational data, for example, up/down, left/right, and any immediate analytical overlays or emotional data. The goal is to capture the most direct, subconscious response to the target's signal. Stage 2, sensory data and dimensionality. Viewers then expand upon initial impressions by systematically recording raw sensory inputs, colors, textures, sounds, temperatures, smells, and kinesthetic feelings, for example, movement, pressure. They also begin to perceive basic dimensionality, scale, and simple structural forms. Stage 3, aesthetic/qualitative and dimensional data. This stage involves integrating the collected sensory data into more complex perceptions, focusing on the target's aesthetic qualities, for example, beautiful, stark, industrial, and overall dimensions or volume. Stage 4, structural components and essences. Here, the viewer attempts to discern specific structural components of the target, their arrangement, and their essence or purpose, for example, a large, rectangular building used for manufacturing, a natural body of water used for recreation. This stage often involves detailed sketching or diagramming of perceived structures. Stage 5, target aspects and deeper understanding. This advanced stage allows the viewer to interrogate specific aspects of the target by posing direct questions about its function, purpose, specific elements, or even personnel. This requires a strong, clear signal and can yield highly detailed, actionable information. Stage 6, energy/dimensional analysis, the most abstract and advanced stage, involving analysis of the target's energy signatures, time dynamics, or underlying principles, often conceptualizing it from a broader, more holistic perspective. 3. Meticulous documentation. All impressions, regardless of their perceived accuracy or coherence, are meticulously recorded in real time, typically on specific forms, to create an auditable trail. This documentation is crucial for post-session analysis and judging. 4. Strict blind feedback. Crucially, during a session, the viewer receives no immediate feedback or confirmation of their impressions. The actual target is only revealed after the session is complete and the collected data has been analyzed and judged by an independent third party. This strict blinding is paramount to ensuring the integrity of the experiment and preventing conscious or unconscious influences on the viewer's perceptions. However, timely feedback after the session is considered essential for training, allowing the viewer to learn to distinguish accurate signal from noise by comparing their perceptions to the actual target. This feedback loop is theorized to reinforce the neural pathways or intuitive connections associated with successful RV. Without this, true learning and improvement in skill would be impossible. The origins of modern remote viewing research are firmly rooted in the early 1970s at the Stanford Research Institute, a prominent think tank in Menlo Park, California. It was here that physicists Harold Puthoff and Russell Targ initiated their pioneering parapsychological research in 1972. Initially focused on the abilities of famed psychic Uri Geller, their work quickly expanded to a broader exploration of anomalous cognition. The term remote viewing was coined by Puthoff and Targ in 1974. Their intention was to establish a systematic, data-driven approach that could be distinguished from the often less rigorous and more anecdotal claims of clairvoyance or general psychic abilities. Their aim was to bring a more scientific rigor to the study of these purported abilities. A pivotal moment in this development was the involvement of artist and self-proclaimed psychic Ingo Swann. Swann, a controversial but influential figure, not only demonstrated compelling abilities in early SRI experiments but, more significantly, fundamentally contributed to the development of the CRV protocol. His insights into the fragmented, often distorted nature of anomalous information perception, that it comes in bits and pieces and is easily contaminated by the conscious mind, were foundational to the structured, stage-by-stage approach that defines CRV. The surprising successes reported from these early SRI experiments soon attracted the attention of the U.S. intelligence community. Driven by concerns about rumored Soviet psychic research programs, which the U.S. intelligence believed were actively pursuing psychic espionage, and a desire to explore all potential intelligence-gathering avenues during the Cold War, the Defense Intelligence Agency began covertly funding the SRI program in 1975. This marked the official genesis of what would become the highly classified and controversial Stargate Project. The Stargate Project, 1975 to 1995, was an umbrella designation for various U.S. government-funded initiatives aimed at assessing the viability of psychic phenomena, particularly remote viewing, for intelligence collection. Over its two-decade lifespan, the project operated under several code names, for example, Gondola Wish, Grill Flame, Center Lane, Sunstreak, Scanet. Key figures within the military program included highly skilled remote viewers such as Joseph McMoneagle, codename 001, a highly decorated U.S. Army intelligence officer and widely regarded as one of the most talented and consistent remote viewers in the program. Lynn Buchanan, a U.S. Army chief warrant officer who transitioned from operational roles to become a key remote viewing trainer and operations officer. Mel Riley and Paul H. Smith, other significant military remote viewers and trainers who contributed to the development and application of the protocols. Throughout its operational period, Stargate viewers were purportedly tasked with a diverse array of intelligence targets, locating hostages, describing foreign military installations, including Soviet weapons sites, predicting future geopolitical events, identifying secret facilities, and even describing the contents of sealed containers. Some alleged operational successes, though controversial and never officially confirmed by the intelligence community, include locating a downed Soviet bomber in Africa, one of the earliest and most cited claims, involving a Soviet Tu-95 bomber crash in Zaire in 1979. Remote viewers allegedly provided coordinates that narrowed the search area for the wreckage, though the precise impact of RV on the actual discovery is debated. Describing a new Soviet submarine, viewers reportedly described a new class of Soviet submarine, including details about its advanced propulsion system, before conventional intelligence methods revealed it, allegedly aiding in its identification. Pinpointing specific buildings in foreign compounds, viewers were tasked with describing the interiors of specific, often shielded, buildings within foreign intelligence facilities, providing details on layouts and activities, such as hidden laboratories or meeting rooms. Identifying specific objects or individuals, in some cases, viewers provided detailed descriptions of objects or individuals, which were later matched to conventional intelligence. For instance, the description of a specific crane at a Soviet missile facility. The project's funding, while a matter of public record post-declassification, is estimated to have been around $20 million over its lifespan, underscoring the seriousness with which the U.S. government explored this unconventional capability. The project was ultimately terminated in 1995 following a public evaluation by the American Institutes for Research, commissioned by the CIA. The EAR report's conclusion was largely dismissive, stating that the information provided by remote viewing was vague and general, and rarely specific enough to be of actionable intelligence value. While acknowledging some striking instances of correct information, the report asserted that the overall accuracy was not consistently high and, crucially, that there was no proven psychic mechanism at play. Proponents of RV, however, argue that the EAR report was flawed in its methodology, focused on operational utility rather than scientific validity, and deliberately downplayed successes for various political reasons. The scientific evaluation of remote viewing has been a battleground between parapsychologists, who argue for its empirical reality, and mainstream scientists, who generally remain unconvinced due to issues of replicability and methodological rigor. The very nature of RV, being non-sensory and non-local, places it outside the standard paradigms of current physics and biology, posing a significant challenge to established scientific understanding. Key studies and methodologies. Stanford Research Institute, SRI, Experiments, 1970s-1980s, the foundational studies by Puthoff and Targ. These often involved outbounder experiments where a sender would go to a randomly selected target site, and a percipient, remote viewer, at SRI would attempt to describe it. The results were then judged by independent evaluators who would match the viewer's transcripts to a set of possible targets, including decoys. Early publications, even in prestigious journals like Nature, for example, Targ and Puthoff, 1974, and Proceedings of the IEEE, Puthoff and Targ, 1976, reported statistically significant results. For example, some experiments used ranking methods, where judges would rank the viewer's transcript against the actual target and several non-target decoys. A hit was registered if the actual target was ranked significantly higher than chance. Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research, PEAR Lab, 1979-2007, led by Dr. Robert Yan. The PEAR Lab at Princeton University conducted extensive research into consciousness-related phenomena, including remote perception. Their rigorous studies, while not exclusively focused on CRV, also reported statistically significant deviations from chance in various experiments involving human-machine interactions and remote perception. PEAR's methodology often involved participants trying to influence or predict random number generators, or describing distant scenes. Ganzfeld studies, while distinct from the structured CRV protocols, the Ganzfeld, German for total field, technique is another parapsychological methodology that has shown some statistically significant results for general extrasensory perception, including clairvoyance. In these experiments, a participant in a semi-isolated environment, for example, dim red light, white noise, attempts to perceive a randomly selected image or video being focused on by a sender. Meta-analyses of Ganzfeld studies, for example, by Charles Honorton and Dean Radin, often report small but statistically significant effect sizes, which parapsychologists see as supporting the broader concept of anomalous cognition that underlies remote viewing. Later government-funded research, following the SRI phase, the remote viewing program moved to Science Applications International Corporation in the 1990s, under Dr. Edwin May. This phase aimed to further refine protocols and address earlier criticisms. While researchers involved claimed successes, including some later declassified reports, the final CIA-commissioned EAR report, 1995, ultimately led to the program's closure, concluding it lacked consistent actionable intelligence value. The judging process, a crucial and debated component, the method by which remote viewing results are evaluated is paramount and frequently debated. Ranked order judging, in this common method, a remote viewer's transcript is given to independent blind judges. These judges are also provided with a set of possible targets, which includes the actual target and several decoys, usually 4 to 7, to make it a 1/n probability of guessing correctly. The judges then rank each target from best match to worst match for the transcript. A hit is usually counted if the actual target is ranked first or, in some cases, within the top 2. Statistical significance is derived from the deviation of these rankings from chance expectation. Binary judging, less common for complex RV, but sometimes used for simpler targets, where a judge simply says yes or no if the transcript matches a single, presented target. Direct hits versus overall impressions, judges assess not just specific details, but also the overall gestalt or impression conveyed by the transcript. This subjectivity can lead to accusations of stretching or generality in judging. Statistical claims and the debate over effect sizes. Proponents frequently point to meta-analyses, statistical analyses that combine the results of multiple independent studies, as robust evidence for RV's existence. A recent meta-analysis, Tresoldi and Katz, 2023, encompassing 36 remote viewing studies from 1974 to 2022, reported a statistically significant average effect size, with a 95% confidence interval that does not include zero. This effect size corresponds to a hit rate of about 19.3% above chance for a binary, correct/incorrect, judgment. For parapsychologists, such results, derived from combining hundreds or thousands of trials, demonstrate a small but robust effect beyond random expectation. They argue that even small effect sizes, when consistently observed across diverse methodologies, are scientifically meaningful, much like effects observed in other fields, for example, certain medical treatments, or social psychology phenomena. Mainstream scientific criticism. 1. Fundamental lack of robust replicability. Despite statistical claims, independent researchers, especially those outside the parapsychological community, have largely failed to replicate the positive results of RV studies under equally rigorous conditions. This inability to consistently reproduce the phenomenon on demand, across different labs and experimenters, is the most critical scientific impediment to its acceptance. Science relies on reproducibility. If an effect cannot be reliably demonstrated, it cannot be considered a proven phenomenon. 2. Unaccounted for methodological loopholes and confounding variables. Subtle sensory leakage. Critics argue that even with strict protocols, subtle, unconscious cues can inadvertently be conveyed from experimenters, target selection methods, or even the judging process. For example, a reviewer might pick up on auditory cues, for example, subtle changes in experimenters' breathing, fidgeting, or visual cues, for example, reflections in glasses, unintentional gestures. Magicians and skeptical investigators, for example, James Randi, have famously demonstrated ways such leakage could occur, even unintentionally. Cold reading and hot reading. While RV protocols aim to prevent this, critics suggest that viewers, consciously or unconsciously, might employ cold reading techniques, making general statements that can apply to many situations, which are then retrospectively matched to the target, or, in less controlled settings, hot reading, accessing prior knowledge about the target from external sources before the session. Judging protocol subjectivity and bias. Even with independent, blind judges, the criteria for matching a vague transcript to a target can introduce bias. Critics argue that transcripts often contain enough ambiguity that a judge, knowing the target, might unconsciously favor interpretations that align with the actual target, leading to an inflated hit rate based on subjective interpretation rather than objective accuracy. The stacking the deck effect, where judges are presented with one actual target and several poor decoys, could also inflate perceived accuracy. The file drawer problem. Publication bias. This refers to the acknowledged tendency in scientific publishing for studies with positive or statistically significant results to be published, while those with null or negative results remain unpublished and in the file drawer. If only successful RV experiments are reported, it creates a biased picture of efficacy, overstating the actual success rate. 3. Absence of a plausible mechanism. Mainstream science requires a theoretical framework consistent with known physics and biology to explain phenomena. Remote viewing, positing non-local information transfer, lacks any accepted physical mechanism that fits within current scientific understanding. This theoretical void makes it difficult for conventional science to incorporate RV into its understanding of reality. 4. No consistent practical application/actionable intelligence. Despite decades of research and significant funding, the CIA's final evaluation of the Stargate Project, 1995, concluded that the information was too vague, inconsistent, and unreliable to be of practical value for intelligence gathering. This lack of consistent operational utility, even with highly trained individuals, further solidified mainstream skepticism. From a neuroscience standpoint, there is no established neurological basis for remote viewing. Brain imaging studies, for example, fMRI, EEG, on remote viewers have not identified specific brain regions, neural networks, or unique patterns of activity that definitively correlate with or could explain anomalous information acquisition. While some parapsychological research explores correlations with brainwave states, for example, increased alpha/theta production during RV sessions, these findings are largely unconfirmed by independent neuroscience and do not explain the mechanism of information transfer itself. Mainstream neuroscience attributes perception and cognition to known sensory inputs and neural processing within the brain, without requiring non-local information access. Parapsychologists often counter these criticisms by arguing that psi phenomena, including RV, are inherently elusive, subtle, and perhaps non-deterministic, making them difficult to replicate on demand with perfect consistency, unlike robust physical phenomena. They argue that this elusiveness is a characteristic of the phenomenon itself, not necessarily a flaw in the methodology. The signal of RV is extremely delicate and can be easily swamped by noise or subtle methodological flaws, requiring highly precise experimental control and specific psychological conditions that are difficult to standardize across different labs. The cumulative statistical significance across multiple studies, even with small effect sizes, should be considered strong evidence of a real, albeit weak, effect. They point out that many accepted medical treatments or social science phenomena also have small effect sizes but are nonetheless considered real. The demand for a known physical mechanism is premature, given that consciousness itself is still poorly understood from a purely materialistic perspective. They suggest that RV might point to limitations in current scientific models of reality rather than being disproven by them. The observer effect in psi research. Some parapsychologists also propose that the very act of rigorous scientific observation might paradoxically diminish or interfere with the manifestation of subtle psi phenomena, making them harder to detect in highly controlled settings. This idea, while speculative, attempts to explain the challenge of consistent replication. Despite the official termination of the Stargate Project and continued scientific skepticism, remote viewing has not disappeared. It has transitioned largely into the private sector, with numerous organizations and individuals offering training in CRV and other remote viewing methodologies. Many practitioners believe it is a valuable skill for personal development and unconventional problem solving. Ethical considerations. If remote viewing were ever definitively proven and reliably demonstrated, it would open a complex array of ethical dilemmas. The ability to covertly access private information, military secrets, or personal lives without consent raises profound questions about privacy, espionage, and psychological manipulation. Such a capability would necessitate entirely new legal and ethical frameworks. Challenges in maintaining RV skill. Even for highly proficient remote viewers, the skill is not static. It requires continuous practice, mental discipline, and often, personal stability. Factors like stress, emotional turmoil, lack of practice, or even boredom can lead to a degradation of RV accuracy and consistency. This makes maintaining a high level of skill a significant challenge outside of a structured, supported environment. Potential applications, though largely unproven and highly speculative without independent scientific validation, continue to be explored by adherents. Archaeological and historical research, allegedly identifying undiscovered ancient sites, assessing the contents of burial mounds, or gaining insights into historical events where conventional records are scarce. Geological and resource exploration, identifying hidden mineral deposits, oil reserves, underground water sources, or assessing geological stability. Missing persons/objects investigations, assisting in locating individuals or items, though law enforcement agencies generally do not officially rely on such methods due to lack of verifiable efficacy and legal liability. Business and financial intelligence, gaining insights into market trends, competitor strategies, or potential investment opportunities. Personal development and intuition enhancement, using RV protocols to improve intuitive faculties, aid in decision-making, explore personal challenges, or gain self-awareness. Precognitive remote viewing, PRV. Some practitioners also attempt to remote view future events, moving beyond spatial displacement to temporal displacement. While even more controversial, this area explores the possibility of precognition within the RV framework. Remote influencing, a further, more speculative offshoot where practitioners attempt not just to perceive, but to subtly influence distant events or individuals. This concept extends beyond RV's perceptual claims into psychokinetic territory. It is crucial to underscore that the claims of success in these private and applied contexts often lack independent verification, are primarily anecdotal, and exist outside the rigorous peer review process of mainstream science. The scientific community maintains that, to date, there is no independently replicated, peer-reviewed scientific evidence that definitively proves remote viewing as a verifiable paranormal ability. Remote viewing represents a fascinating and persistent challenge to conventional scientific understanding. Its history is deeply entwined with Cold War intrigue, pioneering parapsychological research, and significant governmental investment. While the structured methodologies developed, particularly CRV, offer a unique framework for exploring anomalous cognition, The profound lack of consistent, independently replicated results under stringent scientific controls remains the primary obstacle to its mainstream acceptance. The debate over remote viewing highlights a fundamental tension between compelling anecdotal experiences, statistical anomalies reported by parapsychological researchers, and the demanding standards for evidence required by the broader scientific establishment. Its association with the paranormal often leads to immediate skepticism, hindering objective evaluation by those outside the field. Yet, the persistent claims and the depth of the methodologies developed by its proponents ensure it remains a subject of intense interest. As our understanding of consciousness and the fundamental nature of reality continues to evolve, the question of whether the human mind possesses the capacity to view beyond the physical constraints of space and time will likely remain a captivating and unresolved enigma, continuing to draw both fervent belief and profound skepticism. Its place in the public imagination, fueled by declassified documents and popular culture, ensures its continued fascination, even as it struggles for validation at the fringes of accepted scientific inquiry.